we're going to change tack, come back down to Melbourne. Andrew Robinson, who I know normally lives in a very cool part of Melbourne in the hills. So hopefully it is quite cool at the moment. Andrew, I won't steal your thunder either, but Chief Security Officer and co-founder of 6 and I know you have quite an interesting career as well with some of the government agencies. Welcome to the session. Look forward to hearing your thoughts on cyber from your and the 6 perspective.
Pleasure to be with you, Peter, and I'm afraid to say there's no cool weather outside. The sun is beaming down and I think it's in the mid-30s degrees Celsius here, and it could be a lot colder, and I'm almost looking forward to winter already, but I'll make the most of summer while it lasts. Yes, you're right. As a founder and CISO at 6 my hands are dirty with cyber. Every single day I'm in the trenches with my team, protecting our organisations, but also leveraging the lessons learnt working at 6 as a CISO, but also across industry, be that government, critical infrastructure and technology companies, both big and small. So I'm out there advising our partners and customers on how to manage cybersecurity and governance, risk and compliance to the best of my ability as well.
That's great. Maybe just Susan sort of led us in with what's happened in Australia with the Singtel subsidiary Optus Communications having a major data privacy breach, and also the largest private health insurer, Medibank Private in Australia. And I think I agree with Susan, it was a wake-up call. I mean, how much do you see the landscape's changed in Australia because of those 2 incidents, and what you're expecting to see going forward in terms of changing expectations and obviously regulation as well?
Sure. Yeah. Susan said it well when it was another wake-up call for the Australian public, because there was a lot of their information that was at stake and breached, and they were impacted in those 2. But if I take us back to 2021, the year before, it was the first year that an Australian Prime Minister first stood up in Parliament and acknowledged and was, I think, seeking to deter foreign adversaries conducting cyber attacks against the Australian government and critical infrastructure. And so over the course of the last few years, we've seen a big emphasis on critical infrastructure to start with. But at the same time, I think we might have forgotten or taken the foot off the pedal when it comes to acceleration on privacy. And we've seen that the breaches of Medicare and Optus, and they were the 2 big ones, but there were others, of course, in Australia, in the region and around the world, that were a wake-up call because of the large amount of sensitive personal information involved, and those breaches, as well as lots of scams. So we don't actually report on individual scams, but they do take a toll, and there's lots of reports to the Australian authorities on individual breaches. And if I grab a statistic from the Australian Cyber Security Centre's last report, we saw about a 13% increase in the number of cybercrime reports between 2021 and what we know of 2022 so far, and that equates to 1 report every 7 minutes compared to 8 minutes. And those reports that are making it to the Australian government authorities are really the tip of the iceberg, aren't they? So those breaches are still occurring non-stop. So what are we seeing in response to that? Well, the Australian government enacted changes to the Australian Privacy Act within a matter of days, if not a couple of weeks, to increase the penalties, as Susan was suggesting, from 3 million to 50 million Australian dollars for breaches of the Australian Privacy Act, or at least significant and sustained ones. So at least that catches the eyes of those board members, and maybe changes the calculus when it comes to investment, and not just accepting penalties and making the investment in cybersecurity to make sure you never have to pay a penalty like that. But if I look back over history, being in cyber quite a while, it previously took the Australian government about 10 years to go from Australian Law Reform Commission to recommendation to introduce a notifiable data breach scheme to actually implementing it. And a couple of years ago when that went live, I think that is one thing that's spurring this change, is that degree of transparency. People are making the report. Increasingly, they feel like they have to report it. And the media is picking up on that, and it's getting everyone's attention, and we're sitting down and hopefully starting to recalculate our cyber risk and compliance situations and making more investments. And I can talk more about that, but maybe I'll give you a chance, Peter.
Yeah, I think
I mean,
just on that last point, and I'm sure this is something that Val and the team will pick up today in Davos. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about trust and the value of trust, and it's almost been rhetoric and, I think by a lot of companies lip service, but it does seem now that the companies are getting the message that it's a whole range of regulatory downsides, community trust, actual loss of business and revenue as well. So, perhaps the message is getting through. Andrew, I might let you just finish off. Just, maybe I'll put you in the category of advice for people on, what the areas of focus for 2023 should be, given that you look across a whole range of corporates that you deal with at 6𝗧𝗍. Where should the priority and focus be?
Sure. Okay. So we know that standards, laws, and regulations are going to catch up with us now. They're going to be introduced or enhanced on a sector by sector or jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis. So look out at what standards apply to you, and come up with simple ways to chart a course through that. And I like to say, grab an international standard like ISO/IEC 27001, which we'll also know was updated last year, which was fantastic and a good thing for cyber and information security. If you pick a standard like that that's relatively stable, and quite often all of the laws and regulations will be a little bit flexible, and look at your implementation of a standard like that positively, and that can help keep things simple. You will also need to look at the things that you need to do that are unique to you as a business. There's no standard law or regulation that can define your security program alone. So conducting that risk assessment, understanding what's unique about your business, and how you want to go about managing the response to those risks, getting input from the board as appropriate around their tolerance and how they would like to see the risks managed, and go about and make sure that you take action. Do all of the simple things. The referral down under here in Australia is often to the ASD Essential 8 to make sure that you're doing things like multi-factor authentication, patching systems, and backing up your information, amongst other things. But make sure you make a start, do a broad sweeping improvements across your different controls before you get carried away with any one control, though, because we can sometimes try to invest too much in too few controls, and then we won't have an altogether robust cybersecurity program. And the other last one would be to follow, also as Susan mentioned, but I'll go into a little bit more detail around artificial intelligence and machine learning. It really is changing the face of professional work. And we've seen it applied in the realms of cyber for threat detection and things like that, but we're seeing it used more often in risk and compliance. So here at 6𝗧𝗍𝗶, we had been using a model known as the BERT model out of Google. Previously one of the leading machine learning models for natural language processing that lets us do some fun things that makes the lives of risk and compliance practitioners easier. But there's a new one, and I'm sure it's been mentioned this week, if not at the forums that we're attending, at least in the media cycles that you're watching, but it's ChatGPT. And ChatGPT is a new engine put out by OpenAI, and you can check it out. And that's doing a lot of interesting things and you can use it both to answer questions using a corpus of knowledge that's out there on the web. You can also use it to write code, and therefore you might be able to use it to take advantage if you're looking at the sort of the black hats side of cyber. So definitely that's one to watch, but also be excited about the potential it's going to give us to streamline cybersecurity risk and compliance into the future.
Thanks, Andrew. I mean, ChatGPT will take us down a rabbit hole I suspect we'll never come out of. And I do wonder if next year at this session we might have a little square, which is ChatGPT, and it can actually give us the answers, and we can be challenged by the universe of knowledge out there. Thanks very much, Andrew. And look, it's great to have you here. And 6 clicks again. I'll do the plug. You guys don't need to. 6 clicks, 6 with a 6 clicks.com. Really practical tools and a fantastic startup story from Australia as well. So thanks for joining us, Andrew. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Peter.
I'm going to change tack a little bit now, and I'm going to see if I can get Steve York to come on screen. I can see Steve there, but
yeah, I just can't get my video to work, Peter. I just need to be allowed.
Okay, so we just got Steve on audio there. So Steve is Steve is taking us right back to the time when criminals actually physically robbed banks. And, I'm sure we could talk to Steve for hours and hours about the development of financial crime over the decades. But Steve is one of Australia's best-known financial crime specialists, and also extensive risk and compliance experience. Steve, I might just start with you. I've given you a bit of a leg up there with your CV, but maybe a little bit of about what you've been doing, and then let's get into, I guess, your perspectives on cybersecurity from from again more of a financial crime perspective, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, my vision's not up there. I just can't get in through the video. Yeah, thanks, Peter. I've spent 20 years in law enforcement, and the last 25 years in security, financial crime, AML, fraud, etc., in financial services. So I've definitely seen cyber jump the fastest subject to jump into the boardroom in the last 25 years, and it was amazing to see it. And people, I think, generally weren't equipped to deal with the asymmetrical nature of the warfare with the criminals, because like organisations have to block every hole, but criminals only have to find one to exploit it, and that comes in the weakest point, which is the customers. And that's where every business is vulnerable, because the criminals monitor the behavior of the customers. They're even intercepting emails and not only stealing identities, but it's an ongoing thing, that communication between the organisation and the customer is the vulnerable point. So one of the things that, like the four observations really are, first of all, notice the convergence between risk, security, cyber, and compliance, and how the regulators are looking at it. And they don't look at it when they come in. They don't look at AML in isolation. They look at, okay, what's the transaction monitoring attached to this, and what are you doing about these other predicate offences such as fraud, which is part of AML, of course. The fraud has to be, the money has to be dealt with somehow. And then how do you monitor that, and how do you make sure or satisfy yourself, or the board satisfies itself, that you are stopping the things you see and preventing, to a reasonable person standard, the potential of crime against the organisation. The third thing is, I'll pick up on what Andrew said, and then the AI, and just how that's being used now. And I was amazed about GPT, ChatGPT, because of the, just the leap forward in open AI technology that people can use. And I thought, this is my background, of course, how are the criminals going to use it? And if it can get down to things like, if I can say naturally, I need code to write a virus that will that I can send to someone or send information back to me. And if it's capable of writing that code, then we're going to see, the street kids starting to, try their hand at fraud, because, robbing banks, as criminals have found around the world, is risky. You might get hurt. So the criminals have moved in Australia. When I was in the armed hold-up squad in the 80s, there was 2,500 armed robberies in Sydney alone, so a population of 4 million, roughly. That's with a gun. That's what we only collected information on, or data on armed robberies where there was a weapon. Now that's down to about 150, 200. So have we solved crime? The politicians are running around saying, look at the reduction of crime. No, we haven't solved crime, it's just moved it. And so that AI and getting it to a place where, that ordinary criminals can use it is going to be a nightmare. On the other side, using AI in behavioural analysis so that we can use it. And there is a company out there that is starting to use it, or has actually got it going, where it can tell the way you're holding your phone, and it can actually stop transactions if your behaviour is different to your natural behaviour of the past 100 transactions. So it's picking up those behavioural analysis, and it stops it before the transaction might be taken. And that can be done with mouse movements and other things as well. So that is really, an exciting bit on the prevention side. I'll pick up again what Andrew said about, the compliance levels and picking a standard. And Peter might remember when I was working with him, it took us about 3 months to convince the board about what governance standard we would use. And we thought that'd be a simple thing. But, as people, get confronted with new things and new governance processes, they look, one, what the other banks are doing, what are the, Australian standards, what are the European standards? Is there a better one? Could we do our own? I mean, all that conversation happens in the boardroom. So that trust between the board and the executive is a real must. And that relationship, usually facilitated by the Chief Risk Officer and CEO, has to be built up over a period of time so the experts can do their thing. And I think I think getting everyone aligned on the same page is important. I mean, maybe just one of the things I might ask Jason and Tony, the last speaker, about this is, you've touched on some of these fantastic technologies that are out there. My sense is a lot of what I'll call the non-financial corporates, they're not even at the point of being aware of these technologies, let alone prioritizing which one. And again, I maybe save this question, I noticed, for Jason and Tony, but how on earth do you choose which technologies you want to choose? Because there are lots and lots of options, and we're in this fantastic period of innovation as well, where there are thousands and thousands of new ideas. And where do you prioritize? And again, Tony, I can see you nodding. We'll come to you at the end. You can help us with the prioritization. Steve, sorry, over to you. Well, just my last point that pick up on some of those things. So I think that the area that is up for grabs right now is in the protection area, which is encryption of data at rest, but also data in transaction. And that's going to mean, encryption keys with customers and so forth, but at least encryption with the supply chain, so that, if you've got a third-party IT supplier, it's using encryption at rest, but also encryption in transit, and, what the cloud and sort of like the big warehouses, make sure that that's encrypted differently to the data next door to it in the same stack. I mean, these things, you think we should have thought about this earlier, and there should have been some development in that area, but it's just really starting to come out that cost-wise it's possible.
I suspect the first cars that were ever driven didn't have seatbelts or airbags, so perhaps it's a bit of innovation. And I certainly know the Wright brothers didn't have parachutes. So, Steve, that's been fantastic insights. Any last words you want to leave everyone of areas of focus for 2023 or priorities?
No, I think Susan actually said it was around getting the board, building that relationship to get the board to understand what the priority is. And the second thing is that, I think in the past, we trusted certain suppliers generally. We have to take a risk on new suppliers because that's where the innovation is coming from. And there's going to be that tension between old guard, new guard. But that's a real, I think the six clicks is a perfect example that has been taken on.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Thanks, Steve. And let me give you I'm not giving a plug for everyone. There's only a few special people here, but we won't talk about this tonight, but Steve's one of the world's leading hostage negotiators. And he's written a book. Was. No, you probably still would be. And he's written a book on negotiation. You can find it in Amazon, and it's very easy to track him down on LinkedIn as well. So, Steve, thanks for taking time out of your evening tonight. Really appreciated the insights.